8. Today we think in continents, and it is only our philosophers and historians who have not realized that we do so. Of what significance to us, then, are conceptions and purviews that they put before us as universally valid, when, in truth, their furthest horizon does not extend beyond the intellectual atmosphere of Western man? Examine from this point of view our best books. When Plato speaks of humanity, he means the Hellenes, in contrast to the barbarians, which is entirely consonant with the ahistoric mode of the classical life and thought, and his premises take him to conclusions that, for Greeks, were complete and significant. When, however, Kant philosophizes, say, on ethical ideas, he maintains the validity of his theses for men of all times and places. He does not say this in so many words, for himself and his readers it is something that goes without saying. In his aesthetics he formulates the principles not of Phidias's art or Rembrandt's art, but of art generally. But what he poses as necessary forms of thought are in reality only necessary forms of Western thought. Though a glance at Aristotle and his essentially different conclusions should have sufficed to show that Aristotle's intellect, not less penetrating than his own, was of different structure from it. The categories of the Westerner are just as alien to Russian thought as those of the Chinaman or the ancient Greek are to him. For us, the effective and complete comprehension of classical root words is just as impossible as that of Russian and Indian, and for the modern Chinese or Arab, with their utterly different intellectual constitutions, philosophy from Bacon to Kant has only a curiosity value. It is this that is lacking to the Western thinker, the very thinker in whom we might have expected to find it: insight into the historically relative character of his data, which are expressions of one specific existence and one only, knowledge of the necessary limits of their validity, the conviction that his unshakable truths and eternal views are simply true for him and eternal for his world view. The duty of looking beyond them, to find out what the men of other cultures have with equal certainty evolved out of themselves. That and nothing else will impart completeness to the philosophy of the future, and only through an understanding of the living world shall we understand the symbolism of history. Here there is nothing constant, nothing universal. We must cease to speak of the forms of thought, the principles of tragedy, the mission of the state. Universal validity involves always the fallacy of arguing from particular to particular. But something much more disquieting than a logical fallacy begins to appear when the centre of gravity of philosophy shifts from the abstract systematic to the practical ethical, and our Western thinkers from Schopenhauer onward turn from the problem of cognition to the problem of life, the will to life, to power, to action. Here it is not the ideal abstract man of Kant that is subjected to examination, but actual man, as he has inhabited the earth during historical time, grouped, whether primitive or advanced, by peoples. And it is more than ever futile to define the structure of his highest ideas in terms of the ancient medieval modern scheme with its local limitations. But it is done nevertheless. Consider the historical horizon of Nietzsche. His conceptions of decadence, militarism, the transvaluation of all values, the will to power, lie deep in the essence of Western civilization, and are for the analysis of that civilization of decisive importance. But what, do we find, was the foundation on which he built up his creation? Romans and Greeks, Renaissance and European present, with a fleeting and uncomprehending side glance at Indian philosophy. In short, ancient, medieval and modern history. Strictly speaking, he never once moved outside the scheme, nor did any other thinker of his time. What correlation, then, is there, or can there be, of his idea of the Dionysian with the inner life of a highly civilized Chinese or an up-to-date American? What is the significance of his type of the Superman for the world of Islam? Can image-forming antitheses of nature and intellect, heathen and Christian, classical and modern, have any meaning for the soul of the Indian or the Russian? What can Tolstoy, who from the depths of his humanity rejected the whole Western world idea as something alien and distant, do with the Middle Ages, with Dante, with Luther? What can a Japanese do with Parsifal and Zarathustra, or an Indian with Sophocles? And is the thought range of Schopenhauer, Comte, Feuerbach, Hebel or Strindberg any wider? Is not their whole psychology, for all its intention of worldwide validity, one of purely West European significance? How comic seem Ibsen's woman problems, which also challenge the attention of all humanity, when, for his famous Nora, the lady of the northwest European city, with the horizon that is implied by a house rent of £100 to £300 a year and a Protestant upbringing, we substitute Caesar's wife, Madame de Sévigné, a Japanese or a Turkish peasant woman. But, for that matter, Ibsen's own circle of vision is that of the middle class in a great city of yesterday and today. His conflicts, which start from spiritual premises that did not exist till about 1850, and can scarcely last beyond 1950, are neither those of the great world nor those of the lower masses, still less those of the cities inhabited by non-European populations. All these are local and temporary values, most of them indeed limited to the momentary intelligentsia of cities of West European type. World historical or eternal values they emphatically are not. Whatever the substantial importance of Ibsen's and Nietzsche's generation may be, it infringes the very meaning of the word world history, which denotes the totality and not a selected part, to subordinate, to undervalue, or to ignore the factors which lie outside modern interests. Yes, in fact, they are so undervalued or ignored to an amazing extent. What the West has said and thought hitherto on the problems of space, time, motion, number, will, marriage, property, tragedy, science, has remained narrow and dubious, because men were always looking for the solution of the question. It was never seen that many questioners implies many answers, that any philosophical question is really a veiled desire to get an explicit affirmation of what is implicit in the question itself, that the great questions of any period are fluid beyond all conception, and that therefore it is only by obtaining a group of historically limited solutions and measuring it by utterly impersonal criteria that the final secrets can be reached. The real student of mankind treats no standpoint as absolutely right or absolutely wrong. In the face of such grave problems as that of time or that of marriage, it is insufficient to appeal to personal experience, or an inner voice, or reason, or the opinion of ancestors or contemporaries. These may say what is true for the questioner himself and for his time, but that is not all. In other cultures the phenomenon talks a different language. For other men there are different truths. The thinker must admit the validity of all or of none. How greatly, then, Western world criticism can be widened and deepened! How immensely far beyond the innocent relativism of Nietzsche and his generation one must look! How fine one's sense for form and one's psychological insight must become! How completely one must free oneself from limitations of self, of practical interests, of horizon, before one dare assert the pretension to understand world history, the world as history.